All right, I'd like to call to order City of Littleton City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 7, 2020. Roll call, please.
Mayor Valdez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Malin.
Here.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Here.
Councilmember Elrod.
Here.
Councilmember Fay.
Here.
Councilmember Grove.
Here.
Councilmember Milliman.
Here.
We have a quorum. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We still have a quorum. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Kelly, did you want to say something?
Here.
All right. Oh, cool. All right. I'm hoping you all had a chance to review the agenda. Do we have any changes? Seeing none, it'll stay. I want to just go over the process real quick for the few people that are here for the process of how as we go through our agenda. We're going to go into comments by city staff and council. Then we'll go into citizens' appearances, which we have none tonight. But then there'll be public comment time. And at that time, for the public, the items number 7, the consent agenda, and item number 8, the general business, they do not allow for the public comment. So if you wanted to comment on those, it would need to be during the public comment section. And that's where you can make whatever comments you may want to make. I think that is it. But right now, if we could go into city manager, you have a report for us.
No report, Mayor.
City attorney.
Nothing from the city attorney.
Council, let's start with Pam.
I went to the Next Gen meeting last Thursday night, and to familiarize yourself with that, they came up with a mission statement that they exist to represent, encourage, and engage emerging generation to get involved in city government. They now have a work plan. They worked with Kathleen Osher to develop one, and they are going to work that plan. They had to change it a little bit because they've had a challenge with the number of people that have been able to continue on with the group. So they hope to recruit and then work their plan over the next year.
Excellent.
So,
Kelly.
I have 2 things to report. So Karina and I went to a ribbon cutting this past Friday night for Camp Misfits. It's a new business in Littleton. It's very exciting for them. They were originally in downtown Littleton. They grew out of their 900 square foot facility and they moved to a 2,500 square foot area. And their business is geared towards women to help them meet their health fitness goals through customized fitness training, nutrition education, and compassionate coaching. And they're a really, really neat group of folks. And then on Saturday morning, Pat, Karina, and myself all volunteered at Graceful Cafe for the monthly community breakfast. It was their very first one of 2020. It was super busy and super fun. And they really, truly do exemplify community building within the city of Littleton. I'm very proud and I was very honored to be able to volunteer there. That's it.
Great, thank you. Karina.
Ditto. Nothing else to report at this time.
Thank you. Patrick.
Yes, last night I attended the South Metro Fire Board meeting, and I'm pleased to announce that Fire Marshal Valdez came up and they have a new permit plan. So really excited about that. There was one adjustment to that permit plan. It originally said that for parties under 500, it would require a permit and some fees. We got that reduced down to parties below 150 does not require any fees. They still request that you let them know what's going on, like we all would if you're having a barbecue with a tent or anything like that. So good news for the city and all their districts that they service. That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to follow up on the comment that I made at our last regular meeting about the food security effort in Littleton that is has the participation of Centura Health Organization, that's Littleton Hospital and Porter Hospital. So this makes it real. The intent is to increase enrollment in and this is significant, federal food assistance for everyone who qualifies it, and this, of course, includes people who we would consider homeless. And so that shifts the responsibility for the food out of our local responsibility to a great extent, and make it easier to access healthy food. The people the organizations that we have that are going to get together this Thursday to start working on this are Centura Health, Graceful Cafe, Cafe 180, Tri-County Health Department, Change the Trend, Tri-Cities Homelessness Policy Group, All Health Network, which is the mental health organization that works with our first responders, and some other ones. So we got some real heavy-duty players going there and going to try to coordinate and do a better job at lower cost.
Great. Thank you.
No report tonight.
Thank you. All right, a couple things. I did the Graceful Cafe volunteering too. I did it during the busy hours, Kelly. You guys had the easy hours. And I want to also acknowledge Frank Atwood. He too was one of the volunteers, and your wife. So a lot of folks were involved in that day. So it was a great day, no doubt about it. I met with an organization today. I'll leave their name off the list here. But one of their contractors that they were doing business with for like $1 million had called them and wanted them to go ahead and wire the money to their account. The organization did not, but the contractor did wire money to another contractor and lost $1 million, so it was a phone scam. And then, as well as the city of Erie had a very similar case. So it's real important, everybody out there, don't be giving away money just says somebody calls you up, especially if it's $1 million. Send it to me first, I'll hold it for you. All right, and I just want to remind council of the retreat coming up. It's January 31st and February 1st. Okay, so make sure we have those dates. Okay, if nothing else, we'll move on. We don't have any guest citizens or scheduled public presenters, but let's move on to number 6, public comments. If you wish to speak or address the City Council under public comments, please sign in on the public speaker form. Hopefully you did that before the call of order of the meeting. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The City Council is not authorized by the Colorado Open Meeting Law to discuss, comment, or take action on the meeting on any issue raised by public comments that is not part of tonight's agenda. The mayor may refer the matter to the city manager and/or city attorney for immediate comment after public comment, or staff to obtain additional information and report back to the council as appropriate. Do we have, is it right here? All right, cool. Our first one up is Maureen Shannon. Carol Brezak, you're on deck, and Susan Thornton, you're in the hole.
Hi, friends. It's good to see you guys. I'm Maureen Shannon. I'm Executive Director of North Littleton Promise, but I'm wearing my City of Littleton resident hat tonight. I've lived in this community for 18 years. We raised our older daughter. She graduated from Heritage, and our 6-year-old is at East Elementary. We bought our first home in Littleton almost 2 years ago, and I'm neighbors with Jerry, off of Aladi and Littleton Boulevard. My mom lives just over off of, or near Littleton Prep, and she is 84 and declining. Her memory is failing and her body is just not working the way it needs to. And even though she's like 4 minutes from my house, it's just not close enough. And so we have begun to think about alternatives. A friend suggested a granny flat. And I thought, what is a granny flat? And so we began to explore that issue. A contractor encouraged us to visit the city. I talked to Ernie, the building department, and he said he gets a couple, 1 to 2 requests a week about ADUs, which is accessory dwelling units is what they're called. And but right now the city doesn't allow them. And I would encourage you to consider allowing ADUs. Several communities in the Colorado, or several cities in Colorado have begun to allow them. They are, for us, they would allow as adult children to care for my aging mom just right outside my door. She has about this much in assets that would be drained in 6 months in assisted living. And so we're trying to leverage her assets in a smart way to be able to take care of her for the long term. And we feel like we should be able to do that. Our home, we bought a rental, and our yard is a mess, our backyard, and so we thought about, a garage might be great, and that would increase our property value and increase your, taxes. Tax revenue. But this is an option that would allow us to take care of our aging mom. And in a way, and not just that, but if ADUs were allowed in Littleton, it would allow the city, Littleton city residents to be able to provide affordable housing to family or to other neighbors in need. And I think those really align with values of the city of Littleton, including the housing plan in 2017, along with a comprehensive plan that talked about just being an inclusive community, and housing options were one of them. We have a shortage of affordable housing here in Littleton, and this would be a way to increase affordable housing in our community, and a way for us to take care of our family in a really community-honoring way. I have some resources and handouts for you to look at later.
Thank you. Was that it? That was kind of just...
That's it.
well,
3 minutes.
Just walk away from it like that?
Well,
okay. All right.
do I
No, that's
pound
fine,
a
that's
gavel, or I would appreciate your consideration.
fine. All right, thank you. Carol Brezak. Susan Thornton is after that. Cheryl Bruns. And Nicole.
Need some light in here. Okay. First, the staff report you received tonight is woefully inadequate. An hour on the internet will reap you story after story of problems with the refugee placement program. Communities are saying no more. Cities are trying to get out and can't. The refugees are creating financial strains on local governments. Children are not speaking English, are creating problems for schools. Test scores are going down, and social services can't keep up as refugees are eligible for welfare. This is a government-run program masquerading as a religious nonprofit. Their executives earn six-figure salaries. The State Department pays Lutheran Family Services $2,125 per refugee for initial reception and placement. 45% of that can be kept by the Lutheran Family Services, leaving only $1,168 to be spent on each refugee. Not much. Since 2002, most refugees have come from Burma, Iraq, and Somalia. Last year, the majority came from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the rest from Myanmar, Ukraine, Eritrea, and Afghanistan. But we have no idea where our refugees will come from, but we know from the LFS website that among other populations they serve are individuals with criminal histories. The Center for Immigration Studies cites the high costs associated with resettling Middle Eastern refugees. In their first 5 years in the United States, each refugee from the Middle East cost taxpayers $64,370. The cost of resettlement includes heavy welfare use by Middle Eastern refugees. 91% receive food stamps and 68% receive cash assistance. Just last month, 500 North Dakota citizens went out in frigid temperatures to oppose Burleigh County continuing this program. The commissioners voted 3-2 to continue to receive the refugees, but they've limited the number to 25. A county of 95,000 limited the number to 25. Something you might consider if you do proceed. I don't care what Arapahoe County's done, or Centennial, or if Susan Thornton endorses it, or Mother Teresa. Unless you know how to answer the following questions, you should say no until you have the answer. Who is coming? From where and how many? Will they stop the resettlement if Littleton is becoming economically or socially stressed? What security and health screening have the refugees undergone? How many will come each year? Who is paying for their health care? Who is paying to educate the children who don't speak English and never have attended school? Does Littleton have an adequate supply of government-supported housing? Will demands for housing crowd out Littleton's elderly, poor, or disabled citizens? Where will they work? How much of the $2,125 per refugee is actually spent on the refugees?
Carol, your time has expired.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
What I left you is
Point of
from
order, Mr. Mayor. I think Ms. Brujek's time has expired.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, did you
Point
got
of
what I
order,
said?
Mr.
We
Mayor.
have- Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Okay, Susan Thornton, followed by Cheryl Bruns and Don Bruns after that.
Good evening, Council.
Hello.
Nice to see you all. It's looking so perky tonight. You got a long night, I know. If you look at the back page of the information you were provided, you'll find the facts about refugee resettlement, and I urge you to look at that as opposed to hearing other things that may or may not be accurate. As you, I think, all know, I'm the founder and chair of Immigrant Pathways Colorado, and I had a question about whether we were a refugee resettlement agency. And we definitely are not. Those agencies are federally funded, big deal, and they do a lot of work with refugees. We are just a small community-supported nonprofit. We make grants to low-income immigrants and refugees who are in the country legally, and as I say, they have low income. And our grants are for things like helping people cover the cost of applying for citizenship, getting a place where they can learn English, maybe taking courses to become a dental assistant. There's a huge range of grants. Excuse me. We also give scholarships for immigrants and refugees that are studying at ACC. So that's also another plus. I have some brochures here about our organization, and if you have interest, I'll leave them. I just want to point out that refugees, sometimes people are confused. They're people who are fleeing violence, persecution. They are very thoroughly checked out by the federal government. They are not criminals. Their background's heavily checked. And then they come into the country legally with the right to move anywhere they want. If they come in with assistance from a resettlement agency, they're eligible for 90 days of support for learning English, job skills, getting a job, et cetera. I mean, we want these people to be on their feet, be contributing taxpayers. If you can imagine, I can't, coming into a country and that's totally strange to me, and having 90 days to figure everything out. It's pretty staggering what they do, because the vast majority are working within 90 days. Littleton has a very long history of being a welcoming community. It goes way back, and it's one reason that Dr. Martin Luther King came here in the 60s to speak, because of this history of our being reaching out to people who are disenfranchised, et cetera. So I hope you'll continue that long positive history. And as you know, Centennial approved this letter of support last night unanimously. So I hope you will consider doing it the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we have Cheryl Brunn, followed by Don Bruns, and then Frank Atwood. Pam, is Pam here? Oh, there she is.
Good evening, Council. Cheryl Bruns, District 4. I am commenting on Resolution 07-2020, consenting to initial refugee resettlement. On the surface, openness to helping meet the needs of refugees indeed may seem like a no-brainer. Yet those who've been carefully watching what is happening to refugee resettlements host communities elsewhere are reporting less than desirable effects. Refugees may well contribute positively to a community, yet more than a few communities welcoming refugees without discretion have experienced negative adverse impacts, which makes this resolution's 6th whereas statement questionable, because adverse impacts have been shown to significantly offset the positive contributions stated there. Those include, but aren't limited to, societal disintegration and associated increased crime, Alarmingly, a number of Littleton citizens are already reporting more frequent auto larceny, home theft, and business break-ins. It appears we're already unable to stem it. Similarly, the advocacy position of nonprofits and religious organizations advancing refugee resettlement does not appear to openly and adequately address varied and multiple adverse impacts often generated by refugee resettlement. And the city has not yet demonstrated this would not occur here, should Council approve Resolution 07-2020. Whether Arapahoe County or the City of Littleton have positively established that critically important criteria listed in Federal Executive Order 13888 have been met is unclear. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Don. And then Frank Atwood, then Pam Chadbourne.
Don Bruns, good evening, Council. Continuing on from where Cheryl left off. First, the order focuses on, quote, communities that are eager and equipped to support their successful integration, close quotes. But there is no evidence the city has yet determined whether each community potentially affected by refugee resettlement is in fact eager to see it happen. Secondly, Section 1 of the executive order states that the federal government, quote, should resettle refugees only in those jurisdictions in which both state and local governments have consented to receive refugees, close quotes. But how could council possibly give that consent absent a determination that each potentially affected community is in fact eager to support refugee resettlement, in fact, additional refugee resettlement? The executive order further requires, quote, close cooperation with state and local governments, which could fulfill that other requirement has been met, that the city is equipped to support successful integration of more refugees. But neither does that yet appear that the city has positively addressed that requirement in objective terms. Therefore, resolution number 07-2020 appears premature. We strongly urge council to table the matter until at least two things happen. First, the three deficiencies just mentioned should be addressed. And it seems only reasonable that the city would commit itself to identifying what affected citizens believe are the most probable negative as well as positive effects of bringing more refugees to town, all before it acts on this resolution. Hopefully, those analyses will adequately identify anticipated associated neighborhood character changes as well as impacts to Littleton's citizens, our community's social-cultural fabric, traffic, our parks and natural resources, and yes, local economic stability as well. Unless this is done before council acts, we risk losing what makes us value our city, what sustains it, and our sense of place. And I have just a little bit of time left, I see, which is unusual, Jerry, so I'll just say that...
Oh, joy.
We already see there are a number of people within the city that are not yet well integrated, and this would just only increase that burden. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Frank Atwood, followed by Pam.
Good evening, City Council. My name's Frank Atwood. I live in District 4. First, I'd like to say Happy New Year to everyone. I'd like to also say thank you for voting last City Council meeting to deny South Norgren zoning changes and that you preserve the character of Littleton. Speaking about character, I like the new character of the Littleton City Council as being more relaxed. Thank you all. I look forward to discussing approval voting with all of you, so we're all on notice this year that an additional push for approval voting will be coming at you. I'd like to say thank you with regards to Graceful Cafe and volunteers, and that, yes, the mayor knows how to do an excellent job of running meals around, and compliment him. I'd like City Council to consider 1 minute at the end of the meeting for anyone that has sat through the entire meeting to be able to comment. I think we saw this last meeting when the developer was apparently wanted to come up and thank you all for considering his development. So he was there, and I've had to wait 3 weeks to thank you for your decision. Granted, he may have wanted, I don't see him thanking you today for your decision. So, again, Happy New Year, and look forward to discussing approval voting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Pam Chadbourne.
Good evening, Council. I live a block and a half from here in District 1. Yeah, I'll echo Frank. Thank you for your vote denying the Nordgren rezoning. I wrote you email, and I thank you for that vote. I think it was the right vote for Littleton. A couple of comments about the business coming up. First off, citizen notices of publication should not be an annual decision. I believe that our charter used to say that the Littleton Independent is our publication of record, and that was changed by the Charter Review Committee 4 or 5 years ago under Michael Penny. The resolution says the State Open Records Act, and I'm not sure that's true, and I'm going to ask you to provide a citation for both our local regulation and the cited open records, or whatever is referred to in the Open Records Act, that requires this to be annual. And the reason for this is that local publication and local review of local government is becoming more difficult. Newspapers have declined in the past 20 years at the expense of local coverage and understanding of government. And our voters are less and less informed, yet they want to vote on more and more things. The New York Times had an article in December. Over the past 15 years, more than 1 in 5 papers in the United States has shuttered, and the number of journalists working for newspapers has been cut in half, according to research by the University of North Carolina School of Media and Journalism. And that results in ghost papers. What happens is also the FCC regulations have allowed increased ownership by very few companies. So there are ghost articles in papers that are written somewhere remotely and just show up in a local paper, but they have almost no meaning. We at least have a local paper. We should not hold a sword over them every year and say, well, we might withdraw our publication in your pages. We should ensure that in our charter, and I would like the sites, and I would like council to not only approve that tonight, but make it permanent that Littleton Independent is our publication of record. Let me move on. Downtown moratoriums are okay, but I live downtown, and I've already said I've got major problems with the future land use map, which was not done with our consent, in spite of what our District 1 rep says. It was not. This did not come from the people. It was done by a very few people. We are not an urban area. We don't want what the future land use map says. So I'm going to suggest we need a moratorium on short-term rentals. I don't think council resolved that. And there's just a lot more to do. And finally, I just want to say the urban renewal plan and the future land use map didn't come from the people. So these two things that are cited for both of these, they didn't come from us. There's more work to be done. Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. That is everybody on the list. Is there anybody else that would like to speak that didn't get a chance to sign up? Seeing none. All right. Okay. For consent agenda, we have consent agenda items can be adopted by a single motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to the vote on the motion. Any consent item may be removed at the request of a council member. First item, 7A, Resolution 01-2020, resolution specifying where notices of public meetings are posted and identified the newspaper where notices and other information required to be published will be printed. 7B, ID number 20-010, motion to appoint Commander Hal I should have practiced this, Mandler, thank you, to the Arapahoe County Community Correction Board. Item 7C, ID number 20-002, approval of December 17, 2019 regular minutes. Council, I'm looking for a motion.
Mayor, I make a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, and C.
Second.
We have a first and a second. So you got those, Wendy? All right. So we're moving to approve. A yes is in favor, or no one? Already, nope. Suppose I should go down, Scott.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. All right, our next item of business. Under general business, we have resolution 07-2020, resolution consenting to initial refugee resettlement per the terms of Executive Order 13888. Do we have a presentation of any sort?
Mr. Mayor, yes, just a kind of a brief introduction, if I may, for council. So the staff communication there does kind of explain kind of the this moment in time. So the president has signed an executive order back in September, and per that executive order, local government agencies are supposed to consent if the relocation of refugees or resettlement, better word, is to occur within their jurisdiction. We've attached several documents trying to add some clarity to this, and we have received kind of conflicting information. Some of it is we just simply don't have the answers to. There is a timing issue that these non-profit agencies that work with the federal government for the resettlement are supposed to submit proposals, I think, by the 21st, if I remember correctly. And so the action, if the city of Littleton is going to do something, it would have to be tonight. And so we have a resolution that is being proposed. This is part of a template that's been provided. We have provided city council here with a series of other jurisdictions who have been looking at this particular issue. In fact, we had some council comments earlier yesterday and today about the subject, and we've responded to those. I will update the council that the city of Arvada and Centennial did approve by consent the refugee resettlement yesterday, and then Arapahoe County did that here for unincorporated Arapahoe County earlier today. And it looks like Aurora has scheduled the issue here for January 13th. Adams County is set for the 14th study session. So what value that is to the council, it's for you to decide, but I think we've tried to provide as much background as we can. I think the point here is that this process has been going on for many decades, and this is the first time that local governments have ever been asked whether or not this is approved or, consenting to this process. We do not have any statistics about how many resettle here historically. We've provided here in the council packet, actually, I guess part of the questions that were answered here today, some statistics generally for the state, but we don't have any specifics here for Littleton. So with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if there are any, but that's the issue.
Council, do we have any questions? If not, let's look for a motion.
Mark, do we have the ability to table this tonight for further discussion, or?
If you want to consider this before the application is submitted on the 21st, you'd have to have a special meeting now. Our schedule does not allow that. So it would be, certainly we could accommodate that if that's council's desire. If you do table, then I would ask that you be specific about the reason and what is it that you're perhaps looking for, because much of the information we even heard from public comment tonight, the city is not capable of getting this information in a timely manner. I don't even know if we ever would, to be honest.
Karina.
So you made a comment that this has been, this is the first time that local government's being asked to consent. But in essence, we have been, if a refugee is coming to our community, they have been welcome. So this is how we have been conducting business up until now. So essentially, it's just affirming a continuation of what we have done, as opposed to changing something. It's just, that's in essence why it's considered a consent.
I would say that's correct. We've had no involvement for decades We've never been asked. We have no record of that, the impact or the numbers. And so that's just been our history with this issue.
More comment. I know there were some concerns about impact, and I think when we look at the refugee numbers, there is a ceiling. There's a ceiling that's set by the federal government, and it is very restrictive. And when we look at the numbers that were shared, there was 408, I think I captured, for Arapahoe County. So the level of impact, that 408, when you look at a population of Arapahoe County of 640,000, some of those concerns of how much of an impact or what is a change in a community, it's less than 1%. So I'm supportive of this. I think it's continuing where we are as a community.
Thank you.
Could I make a comment? I just want everybody to know I am in support of this 100%, approving the resolution consenting to initial refugee resettlement. Since the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980 was passed, the City of Littleton has participated in the resettlement of refugees within our community. We have welcomed refugees of special humanitarian concern. The newly adopted comprehensive plan mentions the word inclusive throughout the document. It is a shared value amongst our citizens. I know it is. The City of Littleton shares the values of being an inclusive community, helping those in need, welcoming new families, individuals, and newcomers to our city. By signing this document, nothing changes other than we're signing a document. Let's continue to share our collective kindness, our compassion, and our inclusiveness to refugees who want to become fully participating members of our society. Thank you.
Good. Did you want to say anything?
Do we need a motion before we have discussion?
If someone wants to
Are we
offer-
having discussion
Does somebody
right
want to
now?
offer a motion?
I move to approve the resolution consenting to initial refugee resettlement per the terms of Executive Order 13888.
Second.
We have a motion, first and a second. Discussion. Scott.
Sure, I'll start. I took refugee and asylum law as a law student. I'd like to think I have a somewhat informed and useful perspective on these types of questions. By legal definition, refugees are people who have been carefully vetted by American authorities and determined to have a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. In light of the public comments that were made tonight, I do want to add that refugees have to be otherwise admissible to the country, which disqualifies people with otherwise disqualifying criminal histories. Voting yes on this resolution, I believe, instantiates our stated local value of inclusiveness and also our bedrock national values of freedom, humanitarianism, and respect for the rights of the individual, including the rights to freedom of religion, of political opinion, etc. Littleton has historically accepted refugees for initial resettlement, and I see no reason why this should change. Staff concludes that adopting this resolution will cost the City of Littleton exactly $0. I trust that assessment from staff. Voting yes also continues Littleton's tradition of leadership on immigrant issues that includes our very unique and prized Littleton Immigrant Resource Center. I would add that it's worth clarifying exactly what we're talking about. And just referring back to the materials that were provided from Lutheran Family Services, in the packet that council received, there's a provision on page 2 of that that says however, refugees arrive in the U.S. with legal status and freedom of mobility and could decide to self-place in your county, right? What we're talking about is an initial resettlement period of just 90 days. Refugees, again, because they have legal status and freedom of mobility, could still come to Littleton. So I'm very much in favor of voting yes on this resolution.
Yeah, I think we've established a precedent now of reading statements, so I'm going to do that. I have two major problems with supporting this resettlement request. The first comes from citizens I've heard from who, from both sides of the political spectrum, who are saying, what is the city doing taking a stance on a national political hot potato? Immigration is often described as the #1 issue of difference, of polarization in the country. Do we really want to get involved in that? Another person asked who's going to pay for supporting these people when they're still here after the program ends. And another person from the other end of the spectrum asked why we can find room for these people when we couldn't find room for long-term Littleton residents who were the victims of the Windermere apartment fires and had to move to somewhere else because we didn't have housing for them in Littleton. More important to me is than the subject. I'm representing people's point of view by those things, not my own concerns there so much as process. For council and all of government to function well, we need to have an established process and stick to it if we're going to get things done. And the last couple years with Mark leading us through the relentless process of getting the comprehensive plan and the transportation master plan approved are a good example of that. We did not let things interrupt that. In this case, we were presented with an emergency federal concern that we have very little information about. Council's normal procedure for something we don't know about always, or for the last 2 years anyway, would be to get more information. Short-term rentals was an example of that. And if we weren't able to get more information, and short-term rentals is an example of that too, where we didn't feel we had enough information, we did not move forward. With this one, we've been given an urgent date. It has to be done by this date or else. And a shortage of time can be very useful. It increases urgency and it decreases scrutiny. And so it encourages us to go forward and make a decision, even though, as Mark said, we don't have good information, and it sounds like we possibly won't. The timing. The President signed the executive order, our packet says, on September 26th. The group that brought forward the request to council to consider this waited until December 17th to bring it forward, and then bringing it forward, instead of bringing it forward as agenda items are normally brought to council through a process, they brought it, 2 citizens brought that to citizen comment. So the whole topic came to us in a very unusual way. One of the presenters told me before the meeting that she represented for that meeting the group Immigrant Pathways Colorado. That group is a group that the city has given grant money to, and we know that that group knows how to work within the city in normal process. The chair of Immigrant Pathways Colorado knows as well as anyone how to properly introduce an issue for council consideration, and also knows how to circumvent normal process. She's a former council member and mayor. She founded the Littleton Leadership Academy that is about how Littleton government works. And she teaches classes, and 3 of our council members attended those for 9 months, about how Littleton city government works. This example was a major end run to get the agenda item at the last minute because it's urgent. The problem here isn't the topic of refugee immigration. It's whether or not council wants to be manipulated in this way, or if we want to follow our very successful practice for the last 2 years of following our own calendar and following a process to have exceptions to that.
Cool. Patrick, anything? Okay, I'm going to chime in here if I may. And I do want to separate, as Susan Thornton mentioned, that the Littleton Immigration Initiative is, and that, I think that's still the name, isn't it? Or it was at least called Littleton Immigration Initiative. And that is something very different. Now, individuals may cross over to organizations, but that Littleton Immigration Initiative is an excellent organization. I don't want to confuse the two there, but I will also, Littleton is helping fund that this year to a tune of about $50,000 to $80,000 because they did lose their federal grant. So, and that's an important program to Littleton, but I do want to make sure that's separated. Getting back to the refugee issue, I'm concerned that, well, we just don't know enough. I know a lot of cities are buying into it, and I think it's because maybe they've done their homework. I'm hoping they have, because at this point, we don't know if we sign into this, does that mean that there's going to be a push to get folks into Littleton? We already have an increasing demand for low-income housing and entry-type jobs here in Littleton. We have a lot of homeless here in Littleton that we're trying to get housed and trying to help folks out there. I'm concerned about the impact possibly that it could have on our public school system, which is already, I believe, they have a deficit this year of $4 million. I think the Refugee Resettlement Agency that came to us the other day, they are a private operation, is my understanding, and they're trying to get money for their organization. And being a private organization, they are not subject to the open records law, and that concerns me. One of the big questions on this thing, is Littleton equipped to support refugees successfully and to integrate into our community? Can Littleton accommodate the refugees? Do we have the available resources and capacity to help the refugees to become self-sufficient so that they are not dependent on government welfare? Without knowing the answers to these, I'm wondering if we're just looking for a way that would put these folks in desperate help. They do need help, but are we putting them into a failing position here? The executive order does state that refugees should not be resettled. And then it goes on to say some other stuff there, but it says should not. It doesn't say must not. We can opt in on this thing. There's nothing in there. I've asked this question. I've not gotten an answer back, yes or no. There's no reason if we choose differently, that we can't opt into this at another time. I feel as though we are being rushed because this nonprofit came to us asking for this. Littleton has always been open to new people in our community. Our East Elementary in my district they have dozens of, they tell me they have dozens of different languages spoken at the school. And like I said, we have an incredible program, the Littleton Immigration Initiative, that helps folks to become citizens. I believe we're rushing this because we're being asked to, and we don't understand it completely. Yes, it has been happening over the years. Now there's something in writing that says, oh yes, we will take refugees. And it concerns me, what are we really getting ourselves into? So for that reason, I'm not going to be able to support this issue. Do we have anything else? Karina?
Mayor, I have a couple of comments.
Sure.
So we have been very supportive of a diversity in our community. We pride ourselves in that. Board Member Milliman stated that right from our comprehensive plan that we just went through. So this is a position and a value that we hold as a community. The point of saying rushing into a decision, we actually would be rushing into a decision to not accept refugees if we do not take action. The point and recommendation that I'm making here is that by consent, in fact, we are continuing what we have already done. In essence, it's saying until we know more and truly are prepared to make an alternative decision, then let that time come when more information is available. So I think we really have to look at, if we make no decision, we in fact are making a decision to not welcome the opportunity for refugees here.
Thank you, Karina. Anyone else? And I just want to add, by not making a decision, as you put it, we're not putting this nonprofit in jeopardy. It sounds like they've got plenty of support from other communities, so this private organization will receive some federal money. Council, are you ready for the question? Okay, the motion is, Scott, could you read your motion one more time for me, please?
Yeah, give me just a sec.
Okay, thank you.
To approve the resolution consenting to initial refugee settlement per the terms of the Executive Order 13-888.
Great, thank you. So those in favor for this initiative will say, will vote yes, and those opposed will vote no. Ready to vote?
The motion carries 4-3 with Mayor Valdez, Councilmember Fay, and Councilmember Driscoll voting no.
Yeah, the measure passes. All right, that is it for that. We have no second readings. So at this point, we're going to adjourn into a study session in 10 minutes. Right now, it is 7:20, so 7:30, we'll start up for our study session.
How timely.
Cool. All right, thank you.
7:30.